This is a caring church, and it's a church that is here for a reason. That reason is to serve the people who come, like the Lord said, feed my sheep. Anything you want to do, we'll put you to work. It's a working church, and everybody, to me, seems involved. I've been on 4 mission trips. I've been to Mexico twice, and I've been in mission trips here in Pasadena, working on stuff, being involved. I am an usher. At the 11 o'clock service, I am the head usher, and I'll also teach Sunday school. And that is a big job. For me, it's a big job. And I think that's the trick in this church, is being involved.
I recently started serving communion every second Sunday of the month during the contemporary service. And I had no problem stepping up and doing that. It's important, and it just kind of adds to being a bigger part, of it all, especially here at church. To give someone communion is a big deal, I think. At least to me it is. I know I'm not personally giving it to them, but I'm helping them receive that, spiritual nourishment when they come. So it just makes me feel a little bit more connected to, my church family.
One thing that I can do, and the gift that I've been given, is working with my hands. And I consider myself to be pretty talented with my hands. And so I enjoy doing mission-related work. Going somewhere, it's an adventure in itself, but the people you meet and the relationships you form when you're on a mission trip, and the work you do and the time you spend reflecting on your life and what God is doing in your life and the lives of those around you, it really changes you. That's where I find I'm at my best. That's what I feel like I've been called to do. I've been to Mexico. We took a trip to Tapachula, Mexico, with a group called Mission on the Move. We spent a week dealing with kids in an orphanage, is basically what it amounted to, and their parents had been in prison. And those kids, the things that they've been through and seen, I can't even imagine. That God was there just providing a pathway of conversation between those kids and us adults that we're visiting. And we still Facebook back and forth with some of those kids from time to time and keep up with them, see how they're doing.
When you serve, you're serving with the purpose of showing God's love. It's so important, especially to come to people when they're in a time of need. Your child is sick, you've lost someone you love, you lost your home. There's so many instances in life when you have a down moment. And in those times, you have an opportunity to show God's love that could impact them for the rest of their lives. The rewards are something you almost can't even explain. I think sometimes people see folks that serve, if they choose to serve here, you see it quite frequently here. You'll see the person buzzing around, doing things and helping. And I think probably when I was just an attendee, I'd look at that and think, that looks exhausting. But I think what I didn't understand was they're getting back so much more than they give. They're doing it out of their faith. They're doing it to serve God. And if I have that heart, He will give me ways to serve. And then when I do, He will help me.
Well, when I was a kid, I wanted to be the greatest at anything, something. I just wanted to be the greatest. And so one of the things that I got into when I was in the 3rd grade was I rode my bicycle every single day, and I finally convinced my parents to buy me a BMX bike. And so they bought me a legit BMX bike. And so I had a yellow Schwinn Stingeray. I think that's what the model was. But I traded that out and got this BMX bike. And these were in the days before Google. I don't know how anybody figured out anything before Google. How did you figure out where things happened and what to do? But somehow my 3rd grade brain put together and figured out, maybe I went to the public library. I don't know how I figured it out, but I figured out that I could race. the BMX bike. And I began to get dreams of being the greatest BMX racer ever. I dreamed of sponsorships, and I dreamed of world tours, and I dreamed of fans. Hey, Mike. And so finally, my parents took me to the BMX track on a Friday night. And so I had never raced before, but I had some skills. You know, the teenagers in my neighborhood taught me how to go off jumps, and by that time I had learned how to bunny hop over curbs, and so I felt like I was ready. And so I raced that night and went around the track and pedaled my little legs off, and somehow I made it to the final. And I was in the final race of the night for my age group, and I raced, and I raced as hard as I could. I remember there was this one moment where a little speck of dirt went into my mouth because I was breathing so hard, and I didn't have a face cover thing, and that was not a good thing. But anyway, I finished the race, and then after it was all over, I got so depressed. I was so angry. I was so down. I was so mad because I didn't win. And I couldn't be the greatest if I didn't win. And now I got like third place, but that didn't matter because nothing was as good as first place. And I just wanted to be the greatest. And because I couldn't be the greatest at that, I never did BMX racing again. I expected to be the greatest right off the bat, and it didn't happen. And so, you know, as I've aged, I've begun to realize that there are certain things that I will never be the greatest in. I won't be. And as I've aged and my body has become less flexible, and as I've started to break down in my mid-40s now, I know I'm not going to be the greatest. I'm not even going to be as good as I used to be. But I think in my heart, I still harbor this desire to be the greatest. And I think all of us do probably to some degree. I know that for me, like I still at times get tempted to want to be the greatest preacher in the greatest church, in the greatest city, in the greatest state, in the greatest country, in the greatest planet, in the greatest solar system in our galaxy. And but then I'll meet somebody who preaches better than me, or is more organized than me, and I realize that's hard to do. And I think some of us, maybe we've given up on some of our dreams about being the greatest, but then we still have that in us. So we try to outdo each other, and we try to edge each other out from time to time. We celebrate if we get the closest parking space to the building instead of somebody else. We also seek to be the greatest vicariously. So if we have a kid who's a doctor or a lawyer, we brag about them constantly, because if we can vicariously brag, kind of gain a little glory off of them, then it helps us to feel like we're better than you with your sorry kids. And or we might put on maroon, to try to vicariously lift ourselves up and try to be a little bit better than all those other sorry state schools. Or we might put on burnt orange, to try to, and we just have these ways of trying to be greater than. If we can't be the greatest, then at least we're not as bad as that guy. And that's kind of what we do. And this is just part of the human experience. This is part of what human beings have been about for a really long time. In fact, there's a time in the Gospels where we see that the disciples, the followers of Jesus, they have that same desire. They also want to be the greatest. And they had been following Jesus for about 3 years, and they started to see the potential of this guy. And they were happy that he had let them saddle up with them, and that they were his followers, because it was looking like his popularity was getting to be so large. It looked like he probably had the potential to be the next ruler of Israel, that he had the kind of following that it might take to overthrow the Roman government. And if he overthrew the Roman government and he became the king of Israel, then they would also rise to greatness too. And so they're actually talking about this kind of thing, and he knows it. And they're misunderstanding completely what his whole thing was all about. They did not totally understand. But they're talking about who is going to be who is going to be the greatest one. And he knows about this. And so we find in Mark chapter 9 that he says to them, they were on the road, and he says, "What were you discussing out on the road?" And they didn't answer him because they had been arguing about which of them was the greatest, because they wanted to be the greatest too. And he sat down, which means that he's about to teach them something. He would always, that was the position of teaching, was to sit down. So he sat down, and he called the 12 disciples over to him, and he said, "Whoever wants to be first must take last place and be the servant of everyone else." And he had said it in other places too, that if you want to be the greatest in the kingdom of God, if you want to be the greatest in my kingdom, then you will need to be a servant. You will need to be in last place. And this is a phrase that it sounds pretty nice on a Sunday morning when you're sitting in church in a pew. But how does it really impact your life out in the real world? Because the thing of it is that there is a secret to living in this statement. If we can really capture what he's saying right here, we will discover a truth that will make our lives incredibly more wonderful. If you want to be first, then you'll need to be last. If you want to be the greatest, then you'll need to be a servant. There is such a powerful truth in this. And so Jesus, at the end of his ministry, he decides that at his last meal that he has with his closest followers, he is going to offer them some things. One of the things that he offers in that last meal is he offers them Holy Communion. But he also does this other thing, and we find this in John chapter 13. He takes off his outer garment and he wraps a towel around his waist. And when he wrapped a towel around his waist, he took on the role of a servant, because servants would have a towel wrapped around their waist. And so he wraps a towel around his waist, and he takes some water, and he pours it into a basin, and he begins to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was around his waist. Now, it was customary in those days that people would be offered water if they were a guest in someone's home. They would be offered water to wash their feet. Normally, they would wash their own feet, but also it was not uncommon that if the host of the house had servants, the servants would do the washing of the feet. And so when Jesus does this, he's really taking on the role of a servant. And of course, their feet would have been kind of dirty because they didn't wear shoes like you and I wore. They wore what I consider to be the greatest footwear of all time, which is basically flip-flops. And so they were wearing what were basically flip-flops. But so their feet got dirty out there on the road, and so he did that as an act of hospitality. So he washes their feet, and by doing so, he takes on the role of the lowest person who would have been around. He takes on the role of a servant. But he does this because he wants them to learn, and he wants them to know the secret of living. And he says to them after he washes their feet, and he has this whole thing with Peter that we won't go into, but he puts on his robe again, and he asks them, "Do you understand what I was doing? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, because that's what I am. And since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. I have given you an example to follow." So what he's doing here is he's giving us an example. He's giving us an example to follow. This washing someone's feet is just one example. Basically, what he's doing is he's trying to teach them to be a servant, to be somebody who serves other people. And he says to them, "Do as I have done to you. I tell you the truth, slaves are not greater than their master, nor is the messenger more important than the one who sends the message. And now that you know these things, do them, and you will be blessed." See, if we discover the beauty of being a servant, we will discover a life filled with blessing. It is in serving that we become most in contact with the reign of God, with the kingdom of God. When we serve, that's when we get to discover life as God intended it. It is the quickest way to experience the presence of God. The easiest way to experience the presence of God is to serve. And when you serve, your heart gets filled. And when your heart is filled, it changes the quality of your whole life. If you will do these things that Jesus asks you to do, you will be blessed. That's why he wants you to do it. What Jesus wants for us is to have a life that is filled with life. He wants us to have that life that God dreamed for us to have from the beginning. God's desire for you and for me is not to go around feeling down and dejected because we're not the greatest. God does not want for us to go around trying to outdo each other and trying to put down someone else's children. God wants us to be filled with joy. And the way to fill that joy and to have that joy is to serve. It's to get down and wash each other's feet. In the discipleship pathway, we've been talking about these different marks. These are marks of discipleship. They are life marks. These marks kind of they point to how we're doing in our following of Jesus. And so we talked, if you'll turn in your bulletin, there's a sheet that says First UMC Pasadena Discipleship Pathway. And at the top of that sheet, we say our mission, which is leading people to follow Jesus with their whole life for the transformation of the world. That's why the church exists. The church exists to lead people to discover this life as God intended it, which is about following Jesus with your whole life. We also named we went through and we spent a week on each one of our values, talking about our values. And then the last 4 weeks leading up to today, we've been talking about our life marks. The first is, as a follower of Jesus, I strive to give my whole life to worshiping God. And we named 3 bullet points on what might be included in that. The next one was, I give my whole life to growing in my knowledge of God, and we gave 3 bullet points for that. Last week it was, I give my whole life to developing relationships, and we gave 3 bullet points for that, which you can read. And so today, as a follower of Jesus, I give my whole life to serving God. And if you want to, you can write that in. I give my whole life to serving God. The first of the bullet points is this: I give my whole life to serving God in my local community and beyond. To be serving God and to experience that joy, it includes serving God right where we live, doing things right in our own community, but also beyond our local community. And so this is a church where this is going on. We have a number of things happening in our church that are having an impact on our local community. One of the things that we're doing right now as a church is Kids in Motion. And we have some kids this morning with green T-shirts on. They are participants in our Kids in Motion camp. This is one way our church is serving God in our local community. Another thing that we do is Vacation Bible School, which is coming up, I can't remember, in a couple weeks? There you go, July 13th to the 17th. We also have a Society of St. Stephen office, which reaches out to people that are in the community and serves people's needs in a variety of ways. This year, we also started something called RISE, which was a mentoring program that we began in partnership with Miller Intermediate School. Today, we also have with us a bunch of folks that are there's a bunch of people wearing red that didn't go to UM Army, but those who are wearing red that did go to UM Army, could you guys just stand for a moment so we can see you? These folks in the red shirts that are standing there, they went to Carthage, Texas this past week, where they served people that live in and around Carthage, Texas. They built wheelchair ramps, they built porches. I don't know what all you did. I know you did those kind of things. And so this is a team that we commissioned last week. We sent out into the mission field. They did a bunch of work, and they're back. And so we celebrate what God did through your service for those folks. And let me just ask you guys, does your heart feel more full of the joy of the Lord now than a week ago? Oh, come on, shake your head or do something. Okay, they're just kind of tired, but yes. And later on in the service today, we're sending out another mission team that is going to be going to Ecuador, Quito, Ecuador, the country in South America. They're going tomorrow. No, not tomorrow. Friday? Friday? Yeah, Friday. They're going to go Friday. And so that's a team we're going to send out. We also have a brand new ministry that's going to be reaching people in the community. And it is you may have seen it in the parking lot as you were coming in. There is this red little barn thing. That's a picture of it right there. This is called the Book Barn. This was an Eagle Scout project of an Eagle Scout named Jeremy. I can't think of Jeremy's last name at the moment, but Jeremy and our scout troop built this. They stocked it with books, and our children's ministry is going to maintain and manage the books. But inside of that box, there will be books that people from the community can come and they can take a book, and if they have a book they can leave, they'll leave a book. We will have Bibles in there. We hope they don't come back. We hope people take Bibles and use them. But it's going to be available 24 hours a day. It's not locked up. It's there for the community. It's a take one, leave one community library. And this is a way for us to promote literacy in our neighborhood. And so I wanted you to know about that. We serve God in our local community and beyond in a lot of different ways too, besides just with church activities. We serve God and the community and beyond through things like the Rotary Club. We serve God and the community beyond and our local community through a variety of things. One of the ways that people serve God is by giving of themselves in military service. And while July 4th is the day that we celebrate our country's independence and we celebrate our country's birth, we acknowledge that there are people to whom we owe a debt of gratitude because they've put themselves in serving their country and serving God by serving in our military. And we're going to honor our veterans at the close of the service. There are so many things that we can do through the church and also not in the church to serve our local community and beyond. And this is something that people who follow Jesus with their whole life are involved in. The next thing that I want to talk about is, it's on your sheet. As a follower of Jesus, I give my whole life to serving God. And the second bullet point is, in my church. This is our base of operations. The purpose of our existence is to help people to follow Jesus with their whole life for the transformation of the world. But we need a base of operations to make that happen. And so it's important for people to serve God here in this church. And there are so many ministries. I couldn't possibly list them all, but I'll name a few. Our ushers are part of that. Our greeters are part of that. Our coffee bar is part of that. Our communion team is part of that. Our choir is part of that. Our receptionists who volunteer time during the week and help answer the phone are part of that. Our Prayers and Squares quilting ministry is part of that. There are so many things that we do where we serve inside the church to make our base of operations stronger. And so that is something that followers of Jesus are also involved in. The last one is a little harder to really describe. It's something, you know it when you see it. And it is, as a follower of Jesus, I give my whole life to serving God however I can throughout my whole life. And this is throughout each day of my life. As followers of Jesus, it's not enough to just be part of a mission team once a year or to be part of some kind of a program. It's not enough to do that and then also serve in some way at your local church. The whole idea is that we be foot washers every single day in our homes, in the grocery store, everywhere we go. If we really want to experience the joy of God in our life, we will be seeking to serve God everywhere we go throughout our whole life. And I want to share with you about a person that I got to meet recently. A couple weeks ago, my friend Ted and I went to Nicaragua for a surf trip. And we went to this surf lodge where they divided up surfers into little groups. Ted and I were our own little group. We were maybe, I don't know, we had our own special needs, so they just had the two of us. And so we had a surf guide, and his job was to take us around and get us to different surf places and get us back to camp successfully. His name was Renato. That's him. He's tall. And he is from Brazil, and he was our surf guide. And the thing about Renato, the reason I wanted to talk about him, is that Renato, within the first 5 minutes of meeting him, you learn that he is a follower of Jesus because he tells you. And everywhere we went throughout Nicaragua together, Renato was serving the Lord. If we saw, when we would see a woman and her, well, like there was this one woman and her daughter, they were walking on the road, Renato pulls the truck over, and they got in, and we took them at least further down the road. There were little boys, we saw these little boys, they were about 9 years old, and they were walking home from school. It's a 10-mile walk back to their village from where they go to school. Renato pulled over, and they got in the truck, and we gave them a ride home. Renato is known in the area as being a person who has a big heart. When we were finished with one of our little surf adventures, we had food left over. Renato didn't ask us if we wanted it to, for snacks for later. He gave it to people. And it made my heart just fill up to see this. So he just was giving. And every person he would talk with, he would talk about Jesus. He would say, the best of life comes from Jesus. Renato was not a wealthy man. He had a dirt floor home. He will never have political status. He's just a guy. But I would tell you, he's one of the greatest people I've ever met. And what makes him great is because he serves the Lord every day of his life. I want to show you one more picture. This is a picture of Ted with some kids. These kids walked a mile because they saw Renato in the truck drive down the beach, and they just wanted to talk with Renato. They just wanted to be around Renato. And so they were trying to help Ted get his surfboard case back on. And then here's a better picture of these boys. And Renato they walked all that way, and Renato was talking to them about surfing and about fishing, and then he talked to them about Jesus. And the one on that side, his name was Guapo, which means handsome. And so anyway, I just wanted to share that about Renato. He's somebody who I want to be like, because to me, he is somebody who really is one of the greatest in the kingdom because he knows how to serve. He knows how to serve, and he knows how to give. You and I are called to follow Jesus with our whole life. You and I have been optimally designed to have a life that is filled with life, that is overflowing with life. And it is right there in front of us. And it's just a matter of deciding to serve God, serve his children. Amen.